back in 2006, I didn't really know what a punch pattern was. I had no earthly idea. And all of a sudden, here they were, and they had Dixie with it. And so I recognized what a 1953 Dixie was. And if you look over to the left of that, you'll see the punch pattern, and this is a pretty good size sheet. I would say it roughly is about anywhere from about 2 to 3.5 feet, and so you definitely get some money's worth out of it. Now, when you get in there and you go very close, you can start seeing the colors as they have on there and what they were thinking about at the time. We got to see one of these when Terry Groves had an eagle punch pattern. Needless to say, that reminded me of mine. But now you see this was produced back in 1953. It was 06. And we'll get into this on how that kind of came about because it's always a wonderful thing when accidents happen. Now, the two patches that you see there, the one that looks like it's covered in plastic, that was the one that I have in my collection. The one on the right, as you're looking at it, is the one that came with the punch pattern. Not all the punch patterns have patches with them. This one did. You can't really tell much difference with it right there, but if you had it up close, you can see it's a little rough. And but here again, it came with that punch pattern, and it certainly has a very nice place in my heart for it. That's for sure. Down there at the corner of this punch pattern, you can see that your border has about 1110. Lettering is looks like 2284 if I'm reading it correctly. I didn't know what those things were. I think they're stitches. They got a total. That's all I can tell you, that it at least adds up because I did check that. But 53 was when I first started running into these things on eBay. And once I ran into them, needless to say, I kept going back to the site. I ended up with 4 of them. This is what this kind gentleman, whose name was Q-Dog, but anyway, he was very nice. You can all read it, but I'll read it for you to boot. The company here was in Chicago area, received these items as part of a warehouse being cleaned out this last summer. Now, this was in 06, in November. The person involved knew I was involved scouting, asked if I had an interest in looking at some stuff before going into the dumpster. What I have is a large pile of patterns, some with patches, most without. There are over 20,000, and I worked my way through 50 to 100 per week. I wish somebody would have called me as far as in Charleston and given me a chance. I may have gone up there and just took a look myself. But over the time, I may be able to find a system, but not yet. If you would like, send me your lodge, camp, or council interest, and I will add you to my list. I already have 15 to 20 people who have requested special items, but I cannot just pick them up and find them since there's no other info other than the actual pattern blow up. So this guy, you know, he was very kind to take the time to answer me back. And it tells you real quick, we're sitting around in a lot of warehouses. We always talk about the best collections are in the landfills, and so this would have been something that would have been on the way to a landfill had not somebody picked that up and saw it. Coming up is going to be our 1954, and if you see it there, you'll notice that both of these patches were very similar in their colors. The punch pattern is vaguely about the same thing. It's got the bottom little corner. If you go at it, the only thing you're going to see more in the lettering down there, which was true if you go around and you start reading it all. And so this 54 Dixie is sitting there. The actual patches themselves were very, very similar. The one that came with the punch pattern was in excellent shape. It was very, very fine mint. And you can see down there in the lower right corner that it was giving you the same numbers. And here again, they add up. So I'm thinking they're just stitching and they're telling you what the border stitches are, what the lettering stitches are. It's kind of a real interesting thing. Needless to say, I was here again delighted that I had these 2 old ones. I would have been better if I could have gotten a 52, which was the first one classified as Dixie. Let's move on to the 1975. This is when we start getting into prototypes. On the far left, you'll see there, this was the delegates patch that was actually put out. There was no staff patch as such. You'll notice that the year for this Dixie is missing. It's 1975. The middle patch is your your prototype. This was told me it was a prototype. I believe it's a prototype. And when you look at the neckerchief, that's when it starts looking a whole lot more like a prototype. The neckerchief has that embroidered into the cloth, so it is not a patch, in case you were wondering. And so this one certainly made me feel like it was a prototype. I got it from a dealer that I trusted, and so very delighted about it. The other thing with the 75 Dixie, as you probably know about the thing, they did have staff neckerchiefs, and those were done after the Dixie essentially closed down by some mothers in Skyuka Lodge. So supposedly 3 sewing machines, put staff across the top. I think the biggest thing on those is always making sure, if you ever go for one of those, that you make sure you've got a good proper on it, because you want to know that that guy was there. The one I finally ended up paying for, I paid well to get it, but he had his Order of the Hour card for Skyuka Lodge. He also had a thank you from the Scout executive and some other information that I had. So I believed him, because you can definitely sew staff across one of these on a good sewing machine, and you may not be able to tell the difference. So one of our friends did that, and so that one scared the living daylights out of me. So I wanted to make sure that mine was going to be something real. Then I had him send me a notarized statement. Now, that was talking about the neckerchief, not the prototype. Okay, next one come up to is 1992. We're back with Skyuka Lodge. They had really a good thing going on prototypes. Patch on the left with the dark blue border is your delegate piece that was given out. It's got a loop. The one on the right is a green border, and it's got a loop, but it's a prototype. And this was sold to me not by a dealer, but by somebody that had, I would use the word an in. I don't know what to say other than saying that they had an in, because they ended up with it. And as far as I was concerned, when it was offered to me and you start looking at it, the center is exactly the same. Staff patch for that was a red border, and so it made good sense that this was a possible that they might use it. I think they chose well by taking the dark blue. The green wasn't a particular favorite of mine as far as in looking at it, but I was delighted to have it. Here again, that was one that was, they looked and found me. I didn't go looking for them, and so I was very delighted to get it. Now, we always talk about prototypes as far as in patches. This time we've got prototype mug. This is from the same Dixie, so they really got into some prototypes here in 92. But you'll see that, and if you can read it, I'll read it out loud for those that are not, that are on by phone. It says OA Dixie Fellowship 1992 items. This was an auction that was put out by Chris Jensen at NOAC. So, Chris is one of these nice dealers you can certainly believe, and he was auctioning these things off, and you can see a tall mug, 4.5 inches tall, one-of-a-kind prototype, straight-sided coffee mug, 3.75 inches tall, one-of-a-kind prototype, 3.5 standard-shaped coffee mug with gold rim, a regular issue sold to participants. Plastic mug, cheap ditty bag item. Those were sent out in our ditty bags. And then a ceramic trivet. I never knew that word. I always call them tiles, but T-R-I-V-E-T, if that's not a misspell, is 4.25 square. And of course, it was one-of-a-kind prototype. And all the prototypes were sent to the Skyuka Lodge advisor when the coffee mugs were ordered, was shipped unsolicited to encourage the OA to order more varieties of the manufacturer's products using the same design. And then, of course, if you want a complete collection of Dixie Fellowship items, these items will be the killer piece to find. That was probably very well said. I know when I was bidding on that, I did not even bid on it. I had somebody bidding for me. Every once in a while, and some of you guys that have been around for a while, if you start to bid on something, some people will use that term, run you up. You probably never had that happen, but that will happen occasionally. In fact, for a while, they just couldn't understand why I was not bidding. So it was an interesting little story. That I think the most important thing, I came home and I still got the box they came in. I always like to keep those as well. It's kind of like when you're buying ceramics, you always like to keep the boxes. The next one is going to be Dixie 94. The prototype patch is left. The regular delegate patch is on the right. When you start to look at it, you'll see very quickly the one that was used has a loop. The prototype does not have a loop. So that's one of the things. But then when you look in the center, you start seeing this solid green. And then when you look at the one that they use, it in turn has yellow. So that was the obvious part of it to start with. If you were looking close enough, prototype did not have Camp Benjamin Hawkins on it, just had the Benjamin Hawkins. And so the one that they finally had fixed ended up with Camp on it. The blue that was there, sitting right up there next to the 94 on the left-hand side of it, was a different shade of blue. The yellows were the same. That blue also was used on the Native American down there. And when you look at the back of this, it was all plastic. And so it looked pretty good. I've also got a thread break from this Dixie. And once you see the thread break and you look at it, then it also kind of helps you. But here again, I had a notarized statement that this was a prototype from the 1994 Dixie. Love to have notarized statements. That way, if I'm bad, at least I've got some paper, and that always makes me feel better. But that came to me not during the 94. That came to me a while afterwards. And that's usually when some of these things start showing up later on, when somebody decides that they want to sell it and not keep it. And this is the 97 Dixie. This was at my lodge, Unali'yi in Charleston, South Carolina. This is a chenille. This was the first chenille that we ever put out for Dixie. It was in 97. And of course, like a good old dad, my son designed the patch, so I like that even better. You can start looking at what the difference is, and it's pretty obvious. The patch that was actually issued, the chenille, is on the left. The prototype is on the right. Now, that was the one they sent us, and back in 97, we just didn't really look at that pink as being a good Dixie color. There's other years that some of the lodges have even had pink patches and things. So that doesn't have anything to do much one way or the other with the color. We just didn't like it. And so it was sent back. Now, I didn't even know that I was not on the selection team. So I didn't even know this thing existed until February of 2000. And then I had an opportunity to buy it. But the only difference here is that this is our deer jumping over one of the mortars on the battery. And you see in the background the Native American's head coming up. And if you were looking out there closely, you'd see something of Fort Sumter. So that was the 45th anniversary of Dixie that we had here in Charleston, South Carolina. Okay, Larry asked me to come up with some of the crazy things in Dixie, so I'm going to interrupt our little thing going in. And these are some of the real funny things. That thing you see for 94 is actually a cushion. Now, just like a lot of cushions, there are some expensive ones, and this one was pretty cheaply made. It's plastic, and if you got on it and did much with it, that would start coming off. The fact that this was 1994, and today we're in 2021. It has been well taken care of. I've got two others that were not as well taken care of when I got them as far as backup, but all the printing is there. I assume there's foam rubber in it. I have no earthly idea. I never did open one to find out. You can see right below it is a comb. That is from the 1988 Dixie that was actually held at Solly, and they had a comb. And of course, once Solly did something like that, Unali'yi in 89 had to do something special too. So that yellow looking thing there, contraption, is actually a plastic paper clip. Now, these are the oddities that come out, and they all had Dixie on them. They all had the lodge names and things like this that made it a little bit more of resemblance later on that it did, was issued at the time. The bell came out with Atakulakula in the year 2000, and that was their ringing bell. It came out in a little plastic box that you could see through and see it. So that was definitely a cowbell there. That was quite loud if you ever took it out. Needless to say, mine has made noise, but it always made noise in the plastic box. This is the first time I ever took it out because it needed to be photographed. And so it went back in its box, and it's sitting very quietly now, which is a lot better than if you've ever been to a Mississippi State football game and they start ringing these cowbells. Okay. Okay, the last prototype that I've got is coming up now. This is Eswa Hapide, and this was in '98. So they were actually using punch patterns until 1998. This was probably, as you can see, it's a pretty wide punch pattern there. All the writing was over in one side, and I had one picture taken of that. And essentially what it does, it just takes and shows you what is there with the colors, and a little bit different than the punch patterns that we'd seen before. Right there is our two flaps. Now these, even though the bottom one looks larger, and it is the one that came with the punch pattern, you can see very quickly it's the angle that the picture was taken. I was trying to get out of the glare from the light above in the ceiling, and it's a little rough. If you look over on the left side, right underneath Eswa, you'll see that it's not as smooth as it is and the one above. You go to the owl, and this was an owl in case you couldn't figure that out. The tail feathers are a little different in the patch that was actually flap that came with the punch pattern, and the one that was actually given out to the service lodge at the time was a little neater. Like I say, it was a big surprise to me when this thing finally came out. It was there because of the number of years in between these. And here again, this was I found this in '07, and it was on the eBay at the time. So this was only, all the punch patterns came out of eBay, which was interesting. It'd been nice if they'd have sent them to the lodge. I'm sure that they would have framed it and kept it. In fact, I used to kid Jimmy Arthur when he was alive and well that I had a punch pattern that they didn't have, and that was always the one thing, and he would have to tell me, yes, you told me about that before. But Jimmy Arthur was a great guy. I'm certainly sorry for his loss, that we don't have him around anymore. So that is the end of the talk on punch patterns and prototypes. I think the biggest thing I've learned with punch patterns is be sure those are coming on eBay, and so they're fair game for everything. As far as prototypes, I always hope that it's a real prototype, and I like a notarized statement. Those make me feel a little better. It doesn't make it cheaper, but it certainly makes me feel better in having them.
I forget the name of the machine right off. I can get it for you guys. But the pattern then that machine, there's a guy that sits there and does it by hand, and he transfers that design to a paper tape, which is about 6 inches wide. And that's what actually drives the production machine. So the sample is made from the cartoon, the big one. The production is made from the tape run.
Wow.
So the last of, like Lion Brothers just got rid of their Shifley machines 4 years ago when they sent them for scrap iron. When they moved out of their Baltimore facility and moved into the other facility. There's only a few Shifley machines left in the United States. Most of them are at universities that teach textiles. They're just big, heavy, bulky iron machines. Whereas the new computerized looms take up a fraction of the floor space.